Hello and welcome again to another Indie Game Spotlight. And today I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce you to Hunter and Sean from Talesworth Game Studio to talk about The Secret of Weepstone. Thank you both for joining us today. I know, Hunter, you're really busy. You're off in DICE in Las Vegas, aren't you?
Yeah, I am away from home right now, but I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Well, thank you very much. So we're going to get right into it, and I'm going to start off with what inspired you to make this setting? What inspired you to make The Secret of Weepstone?
Well, I hopefully it comes through in the demo and in the trailer, but both Hunter and I have a profound love for role-playing games, and specifically role-playing games from long ago. As young as Hunter is, he is as wise. He has like the soul of of like
a
someone
born
who's been born
grognard.
about 50 times.
I think it's funny having, like, I started in a pretty early edition for someone in my age group, because I started in second edition. The very first role-playing game I ever played was AD&D, second edition. So
Yeah, and me.
Yeah, we second edition is the one that we played the most of, and absolute love for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for me, it was the Moldve box set was that's what I found in my, we actually had it as a gift. I didn't even realize it. I went to my cousin's first. He DM'd us with this is the first time I played. It was a weird mix of D&D and an older role-playing game called Chivalry and Sorcery. And I just fell in love, of course, in that session, and came home, realized we had received it as a gift, cracked it open. My brother read the rule book, who's also working on Weepstone, and then took me through Keeping the Borderlands. And it was just, I just fell in love. And it was not just the game, of course, but for me, the art has always been, it's so foundational to me, to everything I've done. My entire career has been shaped around games and gaming. And that early art was the biggest inspiration for Weepstone. I love it to death, and it just makes me happy just to look at it.
Oh yeah.
So when I look at that art, I mean, I am a major fan of black and white art. So completely and utterly, and I can see your backgrounds behind you there. You've got some of that. I know I love it. I know Dean loves it. It's really nostalgic to us. But what has the feedback been like from the community so far about your choice? The reason I'm asking this is because you see so many games these days which are all photorealistic, quite frank. But this is just such a unique, and it's such a nice perspective. What's the sort of feedback?
I think, you go for it.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think what's funny is, I personally, outside of the way we're doing it, always been a really big fan of games with like a high amount of stylization. They tend to age better, be harder to pin to like a certain era and time, etc. And with our game, it's I wouldn't say it's divisive, because I'd say a vast majority of people who care to comment at all on it are big fans, right? They like it. The only point of feedback I think that's funny that I know we've had to discuss multiple times is when people say, "Oh man, are you gonna like tone it down a little?" Because the answer kind of has to be no. Like there isn't really a lot of compromise to make there. Like it is what it is, and so like I don't know that we've really. There are people, I think, for whom it is not for, and there is no way to bridge the gap between the game we are making and those people not liking it, because there's no compromise. Like, but yeah, a vast majority of people say the same thing. Oh my God, this evokes it. I mean, the thing Sean said when we talked about it in the very beginning that he wanted to hear, which we do hear a lot now, is it feels like walking through the art of an old module, right? Which is like
it does.
Yeah,
it absolutely does.
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges that come with doing black and white art. I mean, you can see in the very early prototypes how different it was. We posted some screenshots on a Steam blog, but you know, it's really easy to do all black and white incorrectly or in a way that everything meshes together, you know, and there's not enough contrast between these elements and those elements. But that same limitation was part of the old art. You know, they had those same limitations of not being able to print in full color. They had to do art at a small scale that still reads well with just black and white. And those same challenges, I mean, I felt all of those same challenges when I was building the prototype for this game. And it was really just through months of iterating on, you know, not just the 3D art, but the UI art, how it laid against the background, where the contrast was, how the crosshatch, like the fidelity of the crosshatch, and the comments that I see most. I mean, the response has been, fortunately, overwhelmingly good. So, which has been really, it's, you know, when you're building something that feels niche when you first start it, you know, it's nice to see that it isn't in fact as niche as you thought it was, and that there is an appetite for it. But the one, there's two problems that people have had with it. One is that on some monitors, or monitor types like an OLED, for example, when the black is basically the pixels are off, there's just some weird artifacts that come up, and there's solutions around that. Like I've already prototyped you know, using something other than white, even if it's just not exactly white and not exactly black. That makes a big difference for some people, because it can give migraines. I've read people saying, oh, you know, this art style, I love it, but it just gives me a headache if I stare at it too long. And I'm hoping that there will be options for that. I think the aspect that is not as obvious to someone who's like, well, just, you know, just give an option that's like, you know, like in Obra Dinn, a game that I love and was a huge inspiration for me to just go for it with this art style. He offers a couple different color options if you don't want to go black and white, and so there's just, you know, there's just a few technical and artistic difficulties that come up with that. For example, when you see the black and white portraits against an environment that's not black and white, it's a little jarring. And those are the considerations that I think aren't as obvious to someone who's like, just change it to not be black and white. You know, it's not as easy as that. And then there's some limitations with the custom shader too, the in-game real-time shader that I'm trying to get around right now. But
I'd say there's also you know, as we go through it and we're adding new elements and working on it, like a common loop too that I know, Sean, you're always working on to some degree, is like every time we need to add some sort of like new indicator or thing to, you know, point at something, you know, it usually starts down here as far as like contrast and size, and usually has to by nature get higher than you'd think until your average person's like reads it, because since you can't use color for contrast in most situations, you got size and you've got mostly size movement, like, but you know, your options are much more limited to address how to draw someone's attention to something in a game like this.
But the fun thing about it is that we have to be so creative in the way that we do solves, and Hunter's laughing because we've had so many conversations like this, just like, again, those challenges that the you know, early artists had when we were working with a 3D environment, but then of course a lot of the art is 2D, and that presents challenges in terms of like that we have to solve creatively. Like, yeah, it'd be great if we had a team of 3D artists that are, you know, doing all our creatures in 3D and all this other stuff, but that's just never going to happen. And Bill, who's doing our 3D art, is doing a great job, but he's, you know, you can't do every creature in 3D. Like, it's just,
and that was never really the plan either.
Not the goal either. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
it does create a lot of weird challenges where you'll want to do something like, well, I'll write a room, and then Sean and I have to go back and forth on like, well, we can't let him walk around that thing. That thing needs to be like locked.
Yeah, the camera has to be locked in this particular, and then there's so much creativity that goes into designing these encounters to be, and Hunter and I talked about this before this interview, that we don't want to spoil anything, of course.
No.
So it's hard to give specific examples, but yeah, you have to lean into being creative and solving things creatively, and it that's part of the fun of designing it, I think.
Sean's being very positive about us having set for ourselves a hilariously complicated task by sticking to our guns.
Something though, that. Ooh.
Oh, we lost Hunter.
It's okay. I'll just let him back in. There we go.
We warned them about dice. Sorry. Yeah.
Welcome back.
Okay. There we go.
So one of the things I'd just like to say is that I love the art style, and when we were playing the demo and I saw the rest monster, I squealed.
Iron belly.
Entity.
The iron belly. I squealed.
I shrieked because when I first played the demo, it was a quick dip and I only had about 20 minutes. So I didn't finish it, but I hit the iron belly after finding the +1 Warhammer in the Smiths. And then it got dissolved by the iron belly, and I was over the moon because games just don't do that anymore. And that was it. I was there thinking, is this actually going to destroy my items? Yes, it is.
Yeah,
brilliant.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, same with character death. Character death is some of my best memories in gaming. Hunter has DM'd quite a bit for us. If Hunter's not DMing, I'm DMing. But Hunter, we both have so many stories of losing characters, and in my opinion, I have my checklist of what kind of qualifies as a OSR type tabletop experience.
Sure.
And for me, one of them is that there's going to be character death, and it's a lot of fun, and it should be embraced. But there was a challenge there in that might not feel good to a lot of people, and so mortal favors they're a big part of the story too, for reasons I can't get into yet. But mortal favors are there to kind of help people learn to embrace death, and
that was an organic creation in the process of making it too, because when we were working on it, we didn't start with that, right? Like the mortal favors came in the process of, as we went further and further. Like we were saying, the first thing we wanted to do is make it so that people's first instinct upon losing a character not only is not to not be sad about it or whatever, but to not feel like they should save scum, because I want, both Sean and I, but we both want you can, right? I guess if you really want to, I guess you could, but there is a benefit to not doing that. There is an incentive beyond just trying to play as a purist, right? Which is if you're really a fan like we are, I'd play, I wouldn't save scum. I'm playing through Fallout 1 right now, right, for fun again. And all kinds of stuff happens that I should probably retcon, but not everybody, it's a really depreciated form of play, I think. And so it's kind of a cool bridge to, I guess, bring people who've never experienced that firsthand into it. Like Dean, if you've played, back in the day, I'm sure you're not as hard to convince that it can be fun to lose characters.
Well, actually, I hate losing characters. Okay, I'm one of these people that if I'm playing Baldur's Gate 1 or 2 and I lose a character, I'll go back to a save, and I'm always constantly saving because of my fear of losing characters.
So it's you we're writing it for. Got it.
It is. And can I say, mission accomplished. I lost my first character. I read the mortal favor, and I was like, I don't care if these guys die. I'll celebrate their deaths because the bonuses I'm getting. It took the sting out, and it made me look at the game completely differently. So you did it. You absolutely did. And I love that mechanic. Was it a combined team effort, or is one of you taking the glory for that?
Actually, that's the most 50-50 thing in the game, because Sean suggested the mechanic and I named it. That was
awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Sean,
and the tie-in to the story is beautiful too.
That was a big thing that was important to me was to make sure that there is a as much as you need anything, we always joke that it's like a 16-year-old's idea of how to run a Dungeons and Dragons game in a lot of ways, but like it still feels important for such a core like weird thing that we invented to like actually have a reason that like there's a reason for it. It's not just like tacked on. Once we like connected the thing we wanted to do to what it is, it was like kind of the glue that made a lot of stuff hold together for the whole narrative.
It's really a mechanic that influences player behavior in that you want the person experiencing the game to act in a certain way when a character dies, and it nails that well and truly.
Beautiful.
We fully expect it's, especially on replays, to game the mortal favor system. Like, all right, I'm going to immediately kill, the kid and Ray, or, the kid's I'm going to make sure the kid dies to this, so that I have this bonus.
We've already talked about how it's like, all right, so like at some point someone will for sure, play through the whole game to count the number of encounters of a given character type to do this thing. And I was like, we're not going to stop you, man. If that's fun for you, go nuts. Like, sure.
Fantastic. I think we're moving on to my question. So very briefly, if someone asks you, what style of game is this? What would be your answer?
I mean, we just say a dungeon crawler. I mean, I think some people, when they first see it, they think it's going to be a gritter, which is, it actually started as Grimrock, like a grit. I'm a huge fan of that genre. The first player controller actually was a grid-based movement game, but it just didn't work. It works. Well, put it this way, it works much better as a free move engine, I think. But yeah, I mean, it's an old school crawler inspired by BX-D&D.
Fantastic.
Because anything else is I was just saying anything else is essentially like, because one thing we talk about is it's not meant to be all of any one of the things that contribute to the genre, right? If you want incredibly deep combat, we're not trying to make the deepest combat. If you want incredibly deep role playing, we're not trying to do, right? Like it's a little bit of all of those things, like an OSR dungeon crawl tends to be.
Yeah. I think that's a good description. Without any spoilers, how big will the game be when it launches? Sort of how many hours or how big an area will it cover?
We are aiming for 15 to 20 hours. That's based on what we have done so far. I would say, if you, again, without saying how many places to go or how many levels or whatever, we're guessing it'll be about 15 to 20 hours of gameplay, and that they're, I mean, that sounds about right.
For the that's like based on like what we've built so far and how long it's really difficult for the developer. Like we have other people test it and play it, and like Dread the publisher has people doing QA and stuff, but it's really difficult for us to estimate where the time difference between us trying to pretend like we don't know what each thing is and like taking our time to like the average player, because a lot of people have spent, even in the demo, a lot of time, you know what I mean? So that's where that estimation comes in, where it's, I think realistically where we're at, 15 feels like the kind of the floor for a lot of people, I think, not really the ceiling, so
it is so hard to estimate when you've played content a million times. You
kind of whiz through it, and
you just can't remember what it was like when you're creeping around and exploring, and when you're in your character sheet fiddling with your equipment, and when you're but I'm guessing I would be happy with 20 hours of content. That's what I feel like would be a pretty good experience, with such a small group of people working on this. Like I'm really the only full-time person right now that's doing this, so and then Hunter and my brother Matt are working quite a bit on it, and then a lot of great artists, of course, that you've seen the art for. But we can't do like a Baldur's Gate 3 experience, like that much content. But and it's a different kind of experience too. Then
definitely
fantastic.
The important bit for me is is what sort of month do I need to book Dean out for the week to play
Right.
it? Because you know, we're going to have to do that. I know that we're going to have to do that, and I'm going to book the week off as well.
We're aiming end of the year right now, but we don't have any official date established yet. Yeah. When it's done, I guess.
That's the magic words.
We're still done. It'll take the amount of time we have to work on it. Like,
I'd rather it's delayed and it comes out according to your vision than you rush it at the end. And
the good news is that we know the publisher pretty well, and I think they're convincible to let games have the time they need. So.
Yeah, Hunter, do you want to talk about your role?
Yeah, sure. I can briefly, for context, I guess. So the reason I'm part-time on Weepstone is because I'm also the director of Dread XP, the publisher. And it's a funny story. A lot of people ask about how the game, came to be and got signed. And the conversation went basically the opposite of everyone would think, which is Sean and I have been friends for a very long time, like the better part of, a decade and a half now. But he's been working on this since we started playing Keep on the Borderlands and BX mid-pandemic, and it was for something, right? Sean was like, "Hey, can you run us through some OSR stuff? I'm working on something." I said, "Yeah, sure. Do you want to play Keep?" And so we ran Keep for a good while, and then eventually, a year after that, year and a half, is when you finally were like, "Hey, I got the prototype, I did it," and he showed it to me. And said, "Hey, I'm not trying to get you. I know you run a publisher. This isn't really for you guys. I want you to work with me if you're interested, though, right? As writer." And I told him, "Yeah, of course. There's no world in which I wouldn't want to be the writer for this." But
I said, you're basically the core player, so I need to know if you think this would be fun.
Yes. I do remember you being like, "If you think it's bad, I have a huge problem." And so at the time, I was co-directing the publisher with Brian Clark, the developer of the Mortuary Assistant, and I told him kind of about the project. And he said, "Why wouldn't you let us look at it?" I said, "Oh, it's a conflict. It's weird, right?" And he's like, "No, it's really good. We should talk about it." And so I showed it to the entire crew. And I said, "My friend is making a game. I'm going to be writing on it, whether we sign it or not. So if every single person here wants to work on the game, then we can talk about bringing it to the publisher. But it has to be basically unanimous that everyone thinks it's cool, because I'm going to write on it. That would feel weird, to basically sign my own game." And so, it was absolutely unanimous, and everybody really wanted it. So that's why I am doing 2 jobs, which is, it's a lot.
Yeah, I can understand. The setting, is it all within a keep? And again, no spoilers. Is it all within the keep, or will we experience other settings?
It is not all within a keep.
Oh, exciting. Can you give anything at this point, or is it just enough to say we will venture from the keep at some point?
I think that's the best way to... How about you'll get your share of adventure?
Fantastic.
Right? That's how I would describe it.
Already my mind's going to all these different places. I cannot wait to experience this.
You will be moving around we'll just say you will be in other places in the Kingdom of Talesworth. All of the games that I've made up until this point, I would say 90% of the games I've made have all taken place in this fictional world of Talesworth. And there is bits and pieces from those other games. There's bits and pieces from a book I started long ago. There's bits and pieces. But this game is, as of this game and forward, there is official canon for this world. No more
even establishing locations that persist and things like that.
So everything from this game forward in the world of Talesworth will be official canon. And you will be going to other places within that world.
I joke a little bit because his setting, if you go play the other Talesworth games, the tone of them, they're pretty classically high fantasy, which is, what we both love a lot. But I joke that we're writing the equivalent of Ravenloft in Talesworth, where it's just one little area of an otherwise fairly normal fantasy setting where it's but this part we don't talk about.
Pretty dark.
It's dark there. We don't go there. Other than some traders who have to have no choice but to pass through the area.
Exactly. Yeah.
That is brilliant. What I'd like to do now is move on to mechanics, if that's okay, to get around, to get an understanding of what I should expect in the way of the mechanics of the game. The first thing, and I'm sure you've probably been asked this, and this is just to kind of get it out the way. THAC0. So THAC0's always been an integral part of Basic and AD&D. What was your decision process behind not using THAC0?
Before Hunter, Hunter, he wrote a great blog called, what is the title of that blog?
In Defense of THAC0, parentheses, and why we're not using it.
Yeah. So, and I will just say before Hunter takes this question that we talked about it a lot in the very beginning. So, but yeah, go ahead, Hunter.
So honestly, if anyone who wants to read it, right, our Steam page blog is something where like often Sean and I will talk about something, and like in the case of THAC0, I told him, hey, can I do that? I want to talk about it. Because I'm the like deep rules nerd about like I own too many games and I've read all of them just to understand the rule systems and stuff. And a thing that I'd say is the like core driving principle behind this game that Sean like started is we're not trying to be slavishly devoted to our source material or our inspirations. And that's what using THAC0 in a computer game would be, because you're not doing the math, right? How many people that play Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 never really understood that like driving it is THAC0, right? THAC0 drives those games.
Yeah.
And nobody knows that because the computer was doing the math anyway, right? So all you're doing is learning the slightly different. So in the case of this game, we talked about like, would using THAC0 be truly additive, right? Or would it be, nostalgia for the sake of nostalgia? We're doing a lot of that. We're doing a lot of nostalgia because it's good. But a mechanical choice like THAC0, when, as early as way back in the day, people started using ascending armor class, right? For many it's not that THAC0 is hard to use. It's just harder than it needs to be if you aren't going to hinge everything on it, right? If we want to talk about, we can go, hey, look, if you want to talk about OD&D, right, we can talk about how that works. Like there's, a lot of people love THAC0 / hate THAC0 / whatever. And it was literally just one of many different, right? Like THAC0 was a solution to attack matrices. Like attack matrices came before that, and those were worse than THAC0. That's the defense of THAC0. It was definitely like when it came out, it was great comparatively. So yeah, like it's truly not it's funny because, right, anyone who thinks it's lame that we're not using it, we may not ever do it, but it's not like it's anything other than math, right? You could very much just change how it's showing you the numbers it's calculating and it would be the same, like in a game.
Yeah, we talked about putting in an option to enable it, potentially, but it is one of those funny concepts that people get fired up about it. Which is fun, it's fun to have those conversations. Hopefully people don't get too serious about it. I mean, we're not, it's like we're talking about D&D. Like,
we're not taking a side here at all, right? We're just making a game.
We're just having fun. But yeah, and like Hunter said, we have baked in so much nostalgia, and in some ways that are so tiny that 99% of the people that play the game won't notice. But those are my favorite things to write or to code and create, are things that only very few people will ever notice. But when they do, it's so special. And so
right. We're going to have a number. Right. When you launch, we're going to have a number. Then we're going to have to run a competition of find all those little nuances, because people will love that.
Absolutely. Well, there's one Easter egg in the demo that I've only seen one person mention, and I thought it was fairly obvious, but and maybe more people have found it, and just I haven't seen the post about it. But yeah, there is one kind of fun little Easter egg.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think the game would gain anything by you using THAC0 compared to what you've got. Out the box, it felt natural, the way combat was resolving, the dice roll, and then adding a number to that dice roll, same with damage. It all felt natural. Fully support your decision in not using THAC0. I did a whole love letter to THAC0 talking about THAC0 attack matrices when it came in. But the simple fact is the human brain does not deal with subtraction as well as it does with addition. And it's those extra steps you go through. It's nostalgia, but I think you made the right decision in not doing it.
We just try very much unless it's something that we feel really adds to the core experience. And, we're not just trying to appeal to ourselves. I mean, obviously there's a lot of that, but it should be fun for someone who doesn't have the nostalgia for this experience. And it's real hard to imagine someone being like, you know what, I feel like if it counted down arbitrarily, this would be better. Like, I'd really enjoy -2 AC. That'd be great.
No. Fantastic. So I noticed you've got, I think there's 2 races you can select as part of the demo, Elf and Dwarf. Any other races in the game that you can play?
Halfling.
Yeah,
There will be a Halfling? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the kid's a Halfling. Kid's human, isn't he?
Kid is human. Yeah.
Yeah, that actually brings up a funny point. Not to derail that question, but the kid is actually from a different playthrough. I mean, a lot of what you see in the game comes from past gaming sessions. And the kid is one of our. At some point, we'll tell that story. But that story, which was Hunter's character in the campaign, was one of my favorite D&D stories. And so the fact that he has the teddy bear loaded with the metal pellet, that's from our campaign. And
drawing inspiration like that is so precious, and it makes things feel so much more real when you're playing the game.
Yeah.
To answer it though, we're sticking to, for playable characters, the classics. That is one of the more. Part of it is you got to decide where you're going to stop. And for this game, that was right. I'm not, unless I'm mistaken. We're just going to stick with the 3 demi-human classes.
Yeah. I was about to say, were you going to have gnome? And I think you just confirmed no gnomes.
Yeah.
I don't think they were in basic.
No, that came later.
Yeah.
Just the 3.
Brilliant.
Got to leave room for sequels, right? I mean,
where do you go from that was going to be one of our last questions, which is just how many modules or how big will this be? But we'll come to that at the end if we can. Okay. 0 level starting. I think that's genius. I really like it. Are you fixed into having to take the suggested class, or have you got a bit of freedom? So when you reach first level, what happens?
Yeah, so there was a lot of there was definitely some design decisions there, because just right out of the gate, for example, when you start at level 0, all of the I mean, there was rules for, not in the official rules, but there was rules out there for a level 0 start. But, when you start at level 0 and you want to level up to level 1, normally whenever you level, you get more hit points, for example. But if you start at 0 and you go to 1 and then you immediately roll new hit points, that kind of breaks all of several matrices and grids for data for okay, I'm a level 1 character. I just leveled up. Now you have twice as many hit points at level 1 as you're supposed to have at level 1. So what I did is I broke up the first level. It's not in the demo this way because leveling up is not part of the demo, but you will actually level up at 1,000. Everyone will level up at 1,000 experience points. And then, so you will become officially level 1, and you will these characters will come into their latent classes. So they don't get to choose. We actually, in the beginning, we were thinking about giving options, but it just added there's just so much that it adds to the design challenge. So, so you let everyone levels up at 1,000 XP, and now they're officially come into their latent classes that they were born to be. They're like an adventurer is born from these nobodies,
Right. Yeah.
and then they will inherit their and see their built-in the built-in effects of being that class or race.
Right.
And
the demi-humans.
I noted that, and I think that's a great classic touch.
Yeah. But it just, again, leaning into the whole, I've played every version of D&D and several other, of course, non-D&D role-playing games, and I love all of them for their own reasons. But one of the things I don't like about the current edition of D&D is that you're like, all right, I've created my character. He's a tiny god. And that can be fun. Of course, obviously a lot of people love that. But there is a different game you can also play where you are nobody when you start. And that is a different, but also very fun game that a lot of people have not experienced yet. And so that was what we wanted to bring with Weepstone.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So you're covering the basic classes, is that right? So the Debbie humans will have their race as their class. And then it's the 4 standards: fighter, cleric, wizard, and thief.
That's
Magic
correct.
user.
Magic user. Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for saying thief and not rogue, but yes.
Yes. You were so close, but yeah,
Almost got them all. Yeah.
It is different per region, though. I don't even know if there is in Spain or Italy. I'm not sure if when it was ported, if there was an official thief as opposed to rogue. But for us in the States, it was thief.
Yeah, they definitely changed it eventually. Yeah.
Rogue came in first edition, and definitely second. Second, Rogue was the kind of catch-all for all thief and bard and those subclasses.
Because I think it stuck around past 1E, because if you get Unearthed Arcana, that's where you get that the thief acrobat class. So
I think second edition kind of brought in the archetypes, and the archetypes then tightened, and Rogue was the archetype for all of those, and then it kind of kept through the rest of the editions. I'm just having a quick look. So rest and recovery. I've lost a load of hit points. I assume spellcasters will have spell slots, and when we come on to spellcasting, that's going to be you, Vicky. We can talk about how that mechanic works. But I've depleted a load of resources. Is there a mechanic that governs when I can rest, or whether there's random encounters, or how does that work?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, we just actually had this conversation. And this is one of those systems, again, this is why we didn't do any interviews until, this one, because so many of these systems were still in flux, and we needed to, and they still may change, but we will tell you what the current iteration is, which is there are safe places to rest. And again, this is all based on when we play. This is how we would do it. There are safe places to rest, and you can't just rest. You can't have a battle and then rest right away. You just rest.
There's no short rest, right? Short rest is not a thing. You rest or you don't.
That's a silly idea. Yeah.
Right.
You take a breather, you get your spells back. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Get in there.
Right. So the current iteration is to so in terms of passing time, I don't like the idea of just when it's just real time. I like people should be able to take their time, get up and get something to drink, use the bathroom, and time isn't passing. There's no urging you on, you have to hurry up. I mean, that's fun in a tabletop setting, but when you're at a computer and you're playing solo, I feel like it should be a little bit more relaxed. At least that's the experience that I was shooting for. But as you explore tiles, time passes. When you enter a new room and you explore a new room, time passes. When you have a combat, time passes. And the amount of time that passes for each of those things is, there's just some values that we're setting to that. After X amount of time passes, in other words, after you have explored and played and delved deeper, then rest will be available to you. So you have to be in a safe area, though. So after you rest, you will gain, per the rules as written. Yeah, per the rules as written, 1 to 3 hit points. We might house rule that to be your con modifier instead of a random roll. Right. And then another thing that Hunter and I just talked about actually is there may be the potential for a wandering monster encounter while you're resting.
Depending on the relative safeness of any given resting area, right? They may not all be of equal safeness, so to speak. Yeah. It's a challenge because you want to allow people to, rest and recuperate to some degree, but it's such an abusable thing, right? Like everything else, we also time is such a hard one in this game because it's real-time exploration, right? Like, and like Sean's saying, we, the very first time I remember us having to talk about like, oh, time doesn't exist conceptually, is I had written like, oh yeah, you get this item that heals you. It's a heal over time, right? You use something that heals. And
I found that on my latest one. Yes.
Yeah, and we can't. I was like, oh, before we had considered time pass, it's possible to let time pass now if we do this mechanic. But at the time, it was like, well, we could instead use like the battle, for instance, battles or encounters to pass time in like an abstract way, so that like something that's meant to represent a ongoing effect isn't just ticking, because we also didn't want it to be like, just stand still, don't worry about it, right? That's like
just go back and forth a bunch of times.
Right. That's a negative play cycle that we didn't want to encourage at all.
But there's so many of these design concepts have been present in games for years and years, and there is a certain amount of training that players have had. Oh, I get this, I understand this because I've seen this a bunch of times. So that is always a design challenge, is giving something new or innovative, or in our case, something that feels like it felt to play D&D, to be sitting at a table. What gives that feeling, and but at the same time is codified for
is a good we were joking about that, like the next blog post that I kind of want to write, right, is I was going to call it the tyranny of the machine, because so many of our decisions are like, because you have to systematize an inherently unsystematizable experience, right? Like, since you're trying to evoke something, that's even doubly hard. But like, that's the goal with all of these decisions, is if we can't, obviously, if you mechanically directly translated every single part of BX and like with any choices made authorially at all, it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't feel like playing it, right? Because you're like, I remember this reminds me of when Sean was doing research. He read through the Against the Giants, right? The G series modules, and came back and he's like, hey man, have these always just kind of not had anything in them? I remember they're really fun. And I was like, yeah, that was whoever was running it, right? Like, that's kind of like, there's a lot of good stuff in old school modules, but it came on really early too when we were talking about the game, about possibly adapting an existing module. We realized, well, wait, I'd still basically be writing like 90% of anything, because a module is just, here's what's in a room, right? And then your friend, your DM, is the one who like there's no flowchart for every room. It's your friend, it's your DM.
The Against the Giants modules were some of my best experiences. I have such fond memories of them. But yeah, like I've reread so many modules over the last year, and the first in that series is, it's so many, just room with giants or room without giants. And but we realized that when we were designing out the experience and that so much of the fun that comes from playing D&D is those fun interactions, and we have built those into the game. And so many of the fun things that you will see when you play this game were not in the first version. That's part of our process, is we create the module, and then we write all the interactions in the events. And then when we're playing it, we're like, oh, you know what I would have done if we were really playing? I would have done this dumb thing. And I wish we could share some of them, because I laugh whenever I even think about them. But, and you've probably seen some in the demo that were just ridiculous. Those came from when we were going through
talking about it, playing it.
Playing it, and then watching and being like, oh, you know what I would do right here if we were really playing?
There's a lot of that in the writing too, right? Like, it's in the demo, so it's not a huge spoiler, but like, there's a part where you meet like one of the first people you can actually talk to, and one of the questions you ask is very blunt, like it's very straightforward. And I was like, well, this is what you guys would say though. One of you would absolutely probably just straight up ask. So like, there's a lot of dialogue in the game where it's like, someone's gonna say probably what one of my players probably would have thought. I can't, of course, like emulate everyone in the world, but there are plenty of times where I've chosen to add a dialogue option, and purely because it is for sure what one of my friends who's played with me would ask. Like,
Brilliant. Before we move on to spells, I got a couple of quick fire things. Your attribute bonuses, they are the classic array from the red box set. Yeah, so you've got this big gap in the middle where you get no bonuses. Then I think it's 13, 14, 15 for +1, 16, 17 +2, 18 +3.
Yep. Yeah, and it has been an absolute joy having a reason to read through, to just always keep getting out all these old books, and it's been
Our
my favorite.
development Discord is definitely a lot of that.
Yeah, just always having all of the books on my desk and just having a reason to read through them. It's been so fun.
Sending Sean a screenshot of the fireball spell description and be like, "Thanks, Gary. Thanks for telling me how many cubic yards this is."
Oh, it is. Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. I saw that stat array and I was overjoyed. Saving throws, the classic saving throws.
Yep.
Which I absolutely love. So but I think you've done it slightly different. Well, actually, it was always the way. The number was the number you had to roll or higher on a D20.
Mm-hmm.
Are you keeping to only certain attributes assisting you on those saves, or is the save just the save itself without?
We're using the saving throw table. We also use ability tests as well, which is kind of coming from Call of Cthulhu. Probably the biggest influence in that regard.
Although there was a mechanic in first edition that allowed you to convert stuff into percentages and have a percentage chance.
Well, when we talked about it, he asked, we were trying to do a few things. One, there's just like an issue again of systemization where, roll against this thing doesn't happen as much when you have a GM who can arbitrate, right? There's a lot less of that. But again, it's a game. So we had to find a mechanic to kind of like stand in for that. And we wanted very much for it not to immediately be like, well, very clearly it's a DC, right? It's not, and we're not really approaching it the same way. We don't want people to like mentally think like, oh, okay, I've done this, like with everything else. Oh, I've done this before. Shut off brain, expect a thing that's not really what we're doing. And so I told Sean, well, one of my favorite skill systems in any game is the one that Chaosium made for Call of Cthulhu and the other games, where roll under percentile is very easy to explain in a way that like the human brain can parse better than the wild gradations of D20. Like D20 is not
absolutely. And it fits nicely in with how thief skills are operated in your basic D&D and early editions. So when you level, do your saving throws get better?
That's a good question.
We decided yet. I mean, again, that's what the answer to that is. We're gonna see what feels right, because we want it to feel like good, challenging, but again, one of those we're not slavishly devoted to the source material things is when something is kind of wrong, right? Like talking about thief skills, you want to talk about percentile versus D6. That's not right. It's not correct that the thief at level 1 is literally the worst person at certain thief related things. Yeah. And so, but that's one of the things where the goal will be right, whatever that means to us. But the goal is you'll agree, right? You'll play it and you'll be like, yeah, it feels right.
The fact that elves take 4,000 experience to level up. I mean, a thief is almost level 3 when an elf is hitting level 2. And
I'm pro that as a dungeon master. I love that. That's my favorite.
I mean, they're so good. I get it.
The elf's getting good. Yeah, the elf's getting martial abilities and spellcasting. So
I mean, they're so good, and it kind of makes sense. But is it going
to be fun? Is what he's worried about. And
I completely agree. Yeah,
and we'll see. And I want, when people argue about that kind of a thing, that's my not argue, but when they debate it, that's one of my favorite things to see too. So. The goal would be, from a game design standpoint, my perspective is always, if someone can't decide if they want to play an elf or not because it's just so close, then that's a good balance. If they're like, clearly I'm going to play as many elves as I can, then that means they're too good. So there's, do we need to adjust? But, like Hunter said, if we do need to adjust it just a little bit, we will. We're not going to not do it only because
we can try to pull. There's options, right? And the goal will be, where can you massage it so that again, it feels right? Not because is it an XP difference? Is it slightly narrowing the scope, right, to make it so that it's fighters can do this and elves can't? What thing is it going to take to reach that perfect balance, right? And we'll get that's the goal.
Yeah. Talking of fighters. Are you planning to put any martial abilities in for fighters?
we were just talking about this one. There's like a couple of really common ones, right, that people used to like back in the day, right, which was the like overkill, right? If you could just like nuke something, you could keep going. That would probably be the one if we're going to discuss one, right? At least from my nerd perspective. But like, I don't know that was in the original plan, because people always forget that fighters are good because they're fighters, right? It's like you can use every single piece of armor you find, every single weapon you find. You get pretty good hit points. Your saves are not terrible, generally speaking. In a world where everything is trying to murder you, you're the guy that's like just kind of hard to murder. Like, you're just sort of difficult to murder. Like,
and there will be abilities conveyed or fun things you can do conveyed through equipment too. So that does,
and mortal favors, right?
Like, and mortal favors, of course. So so there's ways that we can kind of spice up combat and give more options while still being, again, not slavishly devoted, but honoring the original rules and gameplay. But again, that more of that will come out as we get farther and farther with content.
I'm quite excited with that. So certain weapons that only a fighter can use to allow them to do a bit more in combat. And
generally I like proficiency in combat, right, is where fighters should have always shined. Like, I'm part of what always attracted me to playing like DX and things like that, right? I always say it's the most D&D you can fit in 64 pages, because like you could theoretically just restart at level 1 over and over and over and play D&D for the rest of your life with 64 pages, right? And
I started over a lot at level 1.
And I think there's something really, I obviously I played 5th edition. I played a lot of 5th edition when it came out. When it was the 3 core books is when I was involved with it the most. And like Sean was saying, right, even from the very beginning of 5th edition, it definitely had the like, I'm a tiny god. 3rd edition had some of that too, right? Like anything from D20 system onward is definitely like much higher skill, like immediately, right? Because I always say that like the difference between old school D&D, at least like where you fall, and if you do roll down the line like characters, is you're just a guy, like you're just basically robbing graves. You might not even be a good guy, like and then in later editions you are inherently a good guy just by your abilities. Was I saying that like I always feel like in old school D&D, it's kind of like, well, there's a gang in this town, and the town can't fight the gang, and you're bikers. You just roll into town with like shotguns, and you're incredibly dangerous too. But they're like, well, what if we hired the bikers to go fight the gang? That's you. You're not like a hero. Everyone's like, well, they're terrifying, right? They're walking around with like more money than any of us have seen in our lives, and like weapons that no one has. Like the context is just so different, right?
Yeah. Talking of levels, what would be the maximum level you think characters could get to?
Yeah, we've talked about.
Well, the goal would be, the way that we've been thinking about it is probably, there will be a range only because, if you find everything, if you're a completionist, then you're probably going to be in the 8 or 9 range, I'm guessing. Which kind of leaves things, if we, for a sequel, the concept of continuing characters, something we've all seen in past games, and the old CRPGs, of course, but don't quote me on that. But, and then treasures are, this might be a different question, but, so much of your XP is going to come from treasure. We both believe strongly in we don't really want this is not a kill things to level a game.
There are mandatory combats, but combat is not inherently incentivized, I guess.
No. With limited resources, limited rest, you don't want to be fighting.
Exactly. The deck is stacked against you when you're in basic expert, I think. And you're not just going to chop your way through this to level up. And so most of your experience comes from treasures. And
and avoiding combat, right? Like we don't generally, like, I always thought it was weird that I know some dungeon masters who would like penalize, like they'd be like, oh, that was a good idea, but it still doesn't give you as much XP as like winning the combat would have. And I always thought that was wrong. I always thought that if you came up with a good idea, you solved my encounter. Even if you sidestepped my encounter, you did solve it. So being smart enough to not have to do what I thought you were going to have to do is also worthy of the experience it would have given you.
Yeah.
You've
defeated those creatures, so you get the XP. Yeah.
Yep.
Brilliant. I had something else then, and it's just gone. We were talking XP.
Oh, it's gone. So I'm going to steal my time because otherwise I'm not going to be able to ask about my favourite subject, which is spell casting. You see, because I like playing spellcasters.
Yeah, so I'm there with you, Vicky. I actually wrote a song called "Always the First to Die" about playing Magic User long ago. So yeah, I also love spellcasting. So the spell system is still in its infancy right now. The big design decisions are, of course, how many spells do you put in and how many non-combat spells do you have and how do they affect the game? So combat spells are easy, right? There's some animation that needs to be done and a little bit of coding, of course, but and this was similar to when I'm playing a role-playing game, is I'm always thinking, like, who's picking these other spells? Like, you have limited spell slots. Who's going to choose? Who's not going to pick sleep? You know what I mean?
Just so good.
Yeah. So part of that. Yeah, I was going to say, like, there's also casters, especially early on. You didn't have a lot of spell slots, and casting spells is fun. So am I going to just get to cast 2 spells and then not use magic anymore until we rest? And so, there is going to be scrolls that only that particular class of magic of caster can use. So you can get a little bit more casting in. And, it is still in it, I don't want to let you down with this answer, but it is in its infancy. And so there is not as much to say about that just yet.
Something, sorry, my cat's decided to stomp in front of the camera. Excuse me. There we go. Now, the fact is that for me, the fact you're even looking at putting spell casting in and you're thinking about it, I mean, that's just fantastic. And for someone who loves playing spellcasters, I'm incredibly excited. So when Dean and I are playing our versions of the Secret of Weepstone, I will be taking the spellcaster through. So you're not letting us down with that answer, because
there's plenty
I'd rather,
I'd
rather you take your time to make sure that you get the spellcasters you want in the game. The one thing that's coming through in this is your love of what you're doing, and that to me means so much more than you having, we're going to have 3 level 1 spells for this.
Right.
I don't care. The fact is you love your spellcasting, you love your fighters, you love pulling all of this together, and that, something, I can't wait.
I need a knock spell for those.
So that's what I was. Ironically, that I was just about to say. The thing that's funny, right, when you talk about trying to anticipate the total spells and stuff, and it's the utility spells that are a problem. Like as Sean is saying, damage spells are fine, right? Damage spells are balanceable, but prestidigitation.
Set your rogue.
Knock's amazing. Sleep is a great spell, but there's so many. The other thing too, right, is the older spells. Some of them had really well defined. This is exactly what it does, but a lot of them too had, wiggly uses. And in a game where the tyranny of the machine dictates that we must set bounds to what things do.
Explicit, don't you? Yeah.
And if you're going to let something trivialize something, it needs to have intent behind it. Because there are things we do. There are conversations that trivialize certain things. There are choices that make things easier. That's cool and good and on purpose. But you can't accidentally be like, oh yeah, we added this one spell that you just hit this button and you win, right? You don't want that.
Yeah, but to be honest, that's important.
We love it. Yeah. So
that's great. So I think that I've covered off my spellcasting. The fact that I know it's going to be in there excites me.
Oh, 100%.
So I think Dean needs to talk to you about armor, weapons, and gear.
I do, and I remembered exactly what I was going to say, which is we're talking about XP, and I noted immediately every gold piece is worth 1 XP.
Mm,
And I think that's, or roughly, it seemed to be that, and I think that's
Yep.
fantastic.
Why
that's
wouldn't
correct.
it be? Isn't that the rule?
Exactly. So I was cheering when I saw that, and I mentioned it. I did a live stream as a test of going through the demo again, and I mentioned it again in there. So we find some interesting stuff. You're very liberal with your magic items, if I can say so. I'm really pleased with that. I love magic items. I sent the kid.
Loot.
Yeah, I sent the kid down the latrine and managed to fish something out. And I did have a good chuckle at the saving throw afterwards. I would have ruled that as well.
That was a big back and forth of like, what do we do? Like, and Sean made the call, and I think it was the right one.
I think that scene, I saw it for the first time during the live stream, and I chuckled because it was unexpected, and it was like, oh, right, we'll just say you failed. That was just great.
One thing we talk about too a lot in that, not to derail you a lot, right? Though, is that like there's moments like that, but that like we don't ever want to overuse that, right? Yeah. Like it exists, but that's kind of the thing. Is again, the tonal, because when you're playing with your friends, right? Like Sean will tell you, I'm incredibly guilty of like really dumb stuff in a game, right? Like someone will ask the name of some NPC, and when it's like, you're never going to see this guy again, I'm just going to make up. I remember I was like, oh yeah, there's a guy in an inn. He's got no left arm, no left leg. His name is Old Man Right Everything. He's just right. He's just right every. You know, that like flippant, like it's part of it. You know, yeah.
I thought the humor was well placed because you're right. The tone of the game is quite it's a very serious tone. It's a very atmospheric tone, but that little bit of levity at that moment broke it up nicely, and then you were back to that tone again. This isn't a Marvel movie where there's a joke every 2 seconds, and I like that.
Exactly. Yeah, like the latest D&D movie. That it was better than the D&D movie before it. But
I love that movie. I love that movie so much.
Yeah, like. But a joke everything doesn't need to be a joke. But that's, I would say that's anytime, all of my games have a degree of humor in them since the beginning. Yeah. And so it's just the way that's the kind of game that I make. It's just, they always have some humor in them. And again, we wrote so much of this like the way we would play the game. It's just bad jokes are bad jokes. If you have a bad joke, if it's a dumb joke, it's a dumb joke, no matter what context it's in. And so, I think right now that there is the right amount, it feels like the right amount of levity for a really dark game. And, hopefully they're well-placed jokes and they land. They probably won't all land for everybody, but when I think about these jokes as I'm doing, is like, our Hunter, writes in, when I read his dialogue, if I laugh, it's like, remember the first laugh, and if I laugh when I first hear something, then I trust that, that's like, okay, we're keeping that because that was funny.
Well, if I'm your intended audience, that was perfect. It had the right tone, right everything.
Perfect.
The last game that I worked on before Weepstone, I'm actually wearing the shirt for, is Infernax, which is a 2D side-scrolling platformer based on Zelda 2 and Castlevania 2. But it's like incredibly gory. It was made with Berserk Studio. And it was an interesting experience doing narrative on that because the creative director Etienne had such a strong idea of like what he wanted. And I'm sure you've played a lot of retro revival games. Humor there's a lot of it. And him and I butted heads initially because I thought that he was really clamping down on stuff that would be very funny. And it was that his mandate was basically, the game is serious. This is it's air quote serious. It's the gory NES game. But to the people in this game, by and large, these events like actually do matter. So like jokes exist, there's levity, sure. But really the like really goofy kind of, slapsticky stuff only happens the further you go off the intended path. So there's some really, really, really goofy jokes in there, but they're usually the outcome of like going very far down an unintended like path. And so doing that really helped with, because I'm a huge fan of horror and comedy together, right? Like there are a lot of people who like nonstop suspense, and I I don't really know if horror exists without the contrast of levity, right? Levity in horror works so well, even if there's just a little bit, you know?
Yeah. I think that the first film I saw that in was Scream. And because it had you really on the edge of your seat, and you needed those moments of laughter to bring yourself back down before you're being brought back up again. And it created that roller coaster of emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Fantastic. So items, you've as I said, finding +1 gear at 0 level, I think that's fantastic. Finding that ring in the latrine, brilliant. What kind of magic gear are you planning to put in the game at this point, if it's if you can share?
So I've always loved fun magic items that have a unique use to them. +1 longsword is fine and dandy, that's great. That is a natural progression for the standard types of gear, but also writing in things that are, things that would, for example, enable thief skills or improve thief skills, but also things that are very unique, like this. We have one weapon. Well, I don't want to spoil it, but some weapon that might have a unique 1 or 2 time use against certain enemies.
Nice.
Where it's just really strong. But yeah, things that have a little bit of a history to them. But yeah, since there is going to be a lot of character death, and a lot of that player power, I think I want to carry over through equipment. That was one of the early design decisions. So that is probably why you're seeing more magic equipment than you would normally see in D&D, because when someone dies, loot the body. You want to pick up say a kind word in their memory, take
then rifle for loose change. Yeah.
When we did Keep, right, I think it was his brother Matt, I can't recall, but someone had rolled really amazing stats. It was a character that I might have naturally rolled 2 18s or something. It was just really, really good. And then they were in the Keep, and through conniving and various tomfoolery, that character before going to the caves was able to get plate, like full plate.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. It makes sense. It made sense. But the funny payoff to that was they hadn't no combat yet, right? So they get to the caves, they kick in the first door, they lose the initiative roll to some goblins, and then that character gets critted by a goblin and dies, before doing anything in the entire game. And then they almost lost that combat because they all had multiple characters, but everybody was fighting over who could loot the body while they were still in combat, because they knew that if they went to go fight the goblins, then their friends would steal the plate mail. So there was this 2-front battle. Hilarious, super funny.
Oh, that sounds ace. That's good.
Yeah.
So you got some great already. I'm liking the sound of this. Some great ideas on magic items, your standards, but then a lot of quite unique stuff.
Well, empowering, but the goal isn't a Monty Hall, right? A Monty Hall campaign is going to, because I've always we did it when I was a kid, right? You wanna, the power fantasy is very fun, but also when you get, it's like eating as much candy as you possibly want as an adult, where you're this is great. Wait, actually, oh no, it's not as good. But we don't want it to also be stingy, because if you a classic OSR game it's hard. It's so hard, and it's disenabling, and you're gonna die a lot. And not that those are bad things. We love those things, but we are trying to make it evocative of having a maybe your friend's not the meanest dungeon master of all time. Maybe they do actually like you a little bit.
It is a fine balance. Yeah.
Yeah. Does this mean you have cursed items?
Oh,
maybe.
I mean, I want to write some cursed items. Yeah.
Oh, that would be fun for the first playthrough.
Yeah. If I can convince Sean to mechanically make it so that they're not always cursed.
Yeah. Are there plans to have random loot?
Negative.
No,
it's all going to be placed. So yeah.
There is a very, very different feel between a 100% handcrafted experience and a procedurally generated or randomized or things come off of this loot table. I know there is some replayability that gets added into that, but when something is intentionally placed by somebody, and that's just always my preference. I get the replayability that you get from like procedurally generated was something on the table in the very beginning I considered, but ultimately it's just, when every single thing is placed by somebody, it couldn't be any more obvious. And so that's the goal. I mean, that's
great.
It kind of fits in with the fact that you can't create characters because you're selecting people in the tavern. You're then recruiting people.
That was an intentional choice in the very beginning, also for story reasons too, right? Because, Baldur's Gate, for instance, there's God, again, right? What a crowning achievement of work, holy moly. But like the world revolves around you, right? That you. And like in this game, you are the party, right? I like when writing generally, I don't even say the party a lot. I say you, like you, the party, because you, the player, because this is kind of, something that anyone who's played the really old school D&D will remember. Anyone who hasn't, the like self-identification, versus the like avatar of you kind of thing of old school versus new school, right? Where you're like, this is, my character, but he's also kind of like a play piece where it's like me, Hunter, is always also behind these characters. And in a way, that's what's going on here, right? You're the party. And so you have to have some control over that story to make it interesting.
Fantastic. So does this mean that you will have sort of item creation, or is that not going to be in this at all?
You mean like a crafting mechanic?
Yeah.
We don't have any. I mean, there are current ways that we're working in where you can actually bring something to life, but it's not your traditional like farm materials. Learn recipes, like that won't be part of it.
You're not carrying your crafting table around in your inventory and then throwing it down. So you can...
But it is potentially possible to find certain things lying in dangerous areas that could be brought together to create something.
Exactly.
Oh, I can't wait to discover that.
Yeah. So, and then I know like there was an earlier question about a sequel, is it like, when we thought about like the level cap, the level range, the plan, of course, from the beginning, I remember however many at this point years ago when I sat down to decide, okay, what's the next game going to be? And this one I'm going all in on. This is a game I've wanted to make for 20 years probably. And so if it does well, which we're of course really hoping, then a sequel would be the natural thing to do, of course, and that's the way that we're thinking about it. That's the hooks that Hunter is putting in now. But the other concept that has also been explored, and this was actually one of the first ideas, was to bring to life one of the classic D&D modules, and that was something that was actually, truth be told, the very first idea was to recreate one of my favorite old modules like Palace of the Silver Princess or something. But licensing brings with it a lot of challenges, and when you have a new concept like I was in licensing with my last company, Jinx. I've had over 100 licenses. It was my life for so long, for 24 years, and it just puts a lot of constraints on your design process. And when you have an unproven concept like this, to come out of the gate and say, look, I know this game isn't even done yet, but this is what we want to do. It would be almost impossible, I kind of realized and learned, to say, okay, but once we have a completed game that has feedback, that has a reception that we can tie to it, and if it's a good one, then we can say, okay, this is the game. So if this is the game that you would agree to, then we're in agreement. But if
we're not going to change to suit you, you just got to be down with what we're doing.
It just, you know, of course there would probably be some tweaks here and there, but but for the most part, we would want it based on old school, like BX rules, or mostly BX with a little bit of 1E mixed in, and a little bit of house ruling, and it's black and white, and or monochrome.
You can't change the soul, right? The soul stays the
Yeah,
same.
it's the heart of it. It's the heart of it. There's, and hopefully that comes through. But just everything, every place that this art is touched, from the module to the dice rolling to even the UI. Ian, who did some of the UI art, he went back. He's like, all of the borders are inspired by the early Molde artwork, like books, and there's just every single pixel in this game has been considered and is influenced, is put in to influence the player, to be reminded of that experience when they were younger.
Our discussion notes on our design documentation would be like a Library of Alexandria of nerd stuff too, because it's like okay, so technically speaking, like this is how this rule would work, but like in this situation, I'm not really sure. It's like on like everything, like all the time, nonstop. It's so ridiculous. And I was gonna say, to add on to Sean's like goals and stuff, the one thing I never like about a game, so I get to say I'm not doing it because I'm writing it, is I always talk about how I think it's legally I'm obligated to say how much I love the movie Highlander for many reasons, but there's a specific one, which is that what makes the first Highlander movie, the best one, of course, is it was never written with the idea of a sequel. They saved nothing, right? Like it's if you never watch the sequels, which that's fine. I like those too, but it would have not been a good movie if at the end of it they like implied that there was anyone else, or that it was like, and now he must fight it. And that hilariously, famously made all of the sequels way harder to make any sense. But truly, it would have never been great, right? And so, like with this game, while the goal is like, hey, if everybody loves it and we can make more, that'd be awesome. The story of this game is meant to be like satisfying, right? Like I've written tons of lore, like any dungeon master, right? But like when you're done, you'll get a satisfying story that's not going to be full of like, well, come back in the next game to find out what happens to your favorite characters. Like,
I think I
love that.
As a player, I would rather have that, be very satisfied at the end. And then if I hear the reception's been amazing, you've sold millions of copies, which would be the dream, but you've sold enough for you to then turn around and say, do you know what? We're going to make a trilogy, our gold box, or something like that. So it'll be different characters, potentially character creation or whatever. You've got a lot of the engine built. I would be over the moon. Or so much continuation of the story
too, for Sean.
Absolutely. I think that there's only a few other things on my list, but I don't think they're appropriate for this this discussion, because they're going into a bit more detail, and I think they're more spoiler territory. So I'm going to keep them more about creatures and the environment and traps and stuff like that. The demo, I think, demonstrates a lot of the kind of interaction with traps, and if anybody's interested in that, download the demo. It's on Steam.
Yeah,
have a
we
playthrough.
Put a lot of thought into the traps. What we can say, right, is that like we have a very, at this point, well-articulated philosophy about how we design things that are traps in the way that we.
I'd like to touch on that just real quick before.
That's not a spoiler, and it's important. Like
so this isn't as evident in the demo, because there are things where you just have encounters, and again, part of that is because it's a demo. The part of the way that we did that stuff, but we want to. In most cases, danger will be articulated, and in a lot of cases can and maybe even should be avoided. But when it comes to traps and secrets, there's again, the way that we've been trained on past games are one thing, but whenever there's going to be a trap, for example, it's one important design decision is that there's a way to know. Whether it's from what the game master or the dungeon master says, the narrator, whether it's visual clues within the game, there might be sound clues, but for accessibility reasons, that we're not reliant on them, but to enhance the experience. But in the same with secrets, it's not just a pixel hunt. Okay, I'm just going to scan and try to find something interactable. The way that secrets currently work are where you are given clues that there is something, whether maybe there's something that you read in another part of the dungeon that tells you that there, something you found that tells you a different room will have this, or there's something visual that's like, something is off here. I need to look around. I need to take a closer look. In real D&D, there would be there's passive roles that you would do, and then certain elves have a better chance of seeing secrets, for example. But since in the game, your quote passive role is the player mousing around and just looking, like your normal playing takes the place of that automatic passive role. So there isn't everyone gets an automatic passive role, because again, like that's kind of already happening from you playing the game. That takes the place. But elves do also have in their field of view, when there's a secret nearby, they're going to they actually do get a roll to see if they found something, and they will say something if they do. So
that's cool.
And so with traps, though, similarly, dwarves can sense that, and
brilliant.
The mechanic is similar in that you got to be careful. You can actually, you can't run in the demo, but you can run right now in the current version. And the intention is to keep that. But the trade-off is that when you're running, you have no passive perception. Nothing will light up that can be interacted with. It's as if you have blinders on. So,
Any opportunity where you could be surprised, you will be surprised if you're running.
Exactly. When you're running, you will blunder into things if you're not careful, and nothing's going to light up for you to interact with. But I knew that when I proposed this, it was because when you're backtracking, that's when people are going to want to run. And I get that,
But we wanted to discourage just like trying to run headlong, because the walking pace of the game is a good exploring pace, right?
It feels good. Right. Yeah, that's the intended experience, and the natural presence of danger will encourage play. And hey, if you want to just always run, it's not going to work out.
You absolutely can try. Sure, why not? Let us know how it goes.
Yeah.
From my perspective, I absolutely hate having to sit there running a character places. It's one of the things I absolutely hate. In fact, when we played an MMO, I used to put my character on follow, and I used to go and do something else so he could run everywhere. So as far as I'm concerned, that suits me well. I like to walk. I like to look at things. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was really also just good. It's a pacing thing, but it's also like with everything, right? The goal is to make the experience feel good. And we realized we took it to PAX, and everyone, amazing feedback. Like we were both shocked. And like, I do this for a living. I publish games, and I was even surprised. And it's my game that I work on. Right. But like a pretty universal thing we got was like, the walking speed feels a little slow. And some of that is us being like, too bad. That's how fast.
Yeah. I got to be honest. I found the walking speed fine. But you're right. When you're then backtracking, you're looking at your map.
When you're backtracking.
Yeah. Some of the levels they get big, right? And if you realize that you gotta go from one place you've been to another place you've been, it's nice to have the option. So
So and those kinds of things will continue to evolve. Like the amount of speed you get from running will continue to evolve. We'll constantly be tweaking, but I'm pretty happy with these design. They feel really good. All of these decisions now. And I would say unique. They feel like the experience continues to feel unique. And my number one, with all my games, my number one goal is always innovation. And forget sales, forget this, forget that. What really gets me excited is if I can create something that's a new experience for someone, because we're all looking for that always, especially in gaming that's been around for so long. Like just what feels like a new video game experience is ultimately the goal.
Yeah. But it's probably heresy to say, as like a guy again who works in publishing, but like to echo Sean's thing, like as a writer too, something we've talked about is I'm a really big believer in, you can't make art to appeal to everyone. And we're not we're like not gatekeepers, right? That's not the goal of what we're doing. Like we talk about all the time. I am a like deep OSR grognard, and there's nothing I love more than being able to use that enthusiasm and knowledge to like encourage people to engage in a thing I like, however they want, whether it's how I do it or not. Because at the end of the day, people appreciating the thing I love is a net positive. But like we are aware that the version of this game where we make tons of concessions to appeal to an even wider audience. I write, so that it's funny to everyone, and that's not a good. It's not as good of a game. It's not as good of a game.
It won't be. No.
Yeah, you end up sanding off all the pointy edges, and then you end up in that gap between like the people who lived through these times and someone who is experiencing this so now you've sanded off all the stuff that would to appeal to these people. Yeah. And then and then you end up in the middle of this gap where no one likes
you end up with no audience because it doesn't really appeal to anybody. Everything I've seen, I've played or attempted to play Baldur's Gate 3. Your game wins in my view, hands down, just based on the demo, and that's purely because Baldur's Gate 3 have the most insufferable NPCs ever. And I hated that game because
my fiance's played it to death, and I've watched a lot of it.
I've got 110 hours in the game, but again, I've played every form of D&D, and I do love them all. But this is a very different game.
It is.
We've done our job. It's just a different experience. So
it absolutely is, and it oozes charm and character, and it took me back to when I was a young lad opening the red box set. So thank you so much.
That means a lot, man. Thank you. That means a lot.
It is special.
Those memories are just so sacred to all of us. Like they're so special, and
we all have them. That moment that you like. Mine's not the red box, right? Because when I only got to play D&D because I had a stepdad who, he's not my stepdad and has not been in a million years. We haven't talked in forever, but I owe him so much because in the 90s, when it was still the Satanic Panic, that was still going on. And I, grew up in a normal suburban town, and he convinced my mom, he was in the Navy and he played D&D. He convinced my mom that it's like, no, it's not, they're not worshiping. It's for dorks. It's fine. You can let him play it. Right. And I remember though, the first time I ever saw is he brought home a character sheet from playing a tournament game, like a 2E tournament game live at like one of the local game stores. And he had a character named Balthus of Gaul, right? And it was just like sitting on the dining room table. And I was like, what is this? Like, what is this? Right? The character sheet. And I in love ever since. Yeah.
Second Ed is where I started, and I loved it. And I love the whole aesthetic. I love how passionate you both are about it. And I love the fact that you're being true to your vision. Yeah. And that, I think, means a lot. One of the things that Dean and I say about our game is we've created a game we want to run and we want to play. And it sounds to me as if you've created a game you want to play. And that, I think, shows. It really does. You've created something. You've got a story you love. You've got an aesthetic you love. You've married the two together. I mean, what else could you ask for?
Not a lot. Getting to work on a dream game with one of my best friends is pretty sweet.
Perfect.
It is the dream. Yeah. Well, thank you both so much.